So thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name's Kirsty. I'm the community coaching lead at Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic. We started these coach socialization series, I think this is our 6th week now, with an intent to provide a platform for coaches to connect, to continue to learn from each other and to learn from a variety of professionals on a variety of topics. So today we have Bryce here with us, who's a mental performance consultant with Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic and also works with Olympic teams such as the women's basketball team. So Bryce today will be presenting how to use our daily training environments to train the brain. So Bryce will be running us through a presentation, and if you have any questions throughout it, please use the chat box or maybe use the reaction button at the bottom of your page, and we'll open up to a Q&A at the end. So Bryce, you can take it away from here.
Thank you, Kirsty. So a few things before I get moving here. First one is, if you don't mind, please don't take any screenshots. We're still working through some of the permissions in terms of what will and won't be shared in the YouTube version of this. So, for instance, there's going to be some documents or some visuals shared of certain athletes, also of scouting reports on teams that we may have to play and hopefully beat in Tokyo in 2021, and it would be a real shame for those to get out there and get in the wrong hands, specifically the hands of Belgium. So if you don't mind, just refraining from taking screenshots, that would be great. I know there's Q&A at the end, but honestly, just feel free to ask a question anytime. Like, just unmute yourself and pop in there, and don't hesitate to interrupt me. As I start sharing my screen, I won't be able to see you guys, which is a real shame, actually. That's kind of the worst part, as all of you probably know. When you're talking, presenting, and you can't see the people who you're talking to, it's just a weird vibe. But nonetheless, just interrupt and ask a question if you want. I can't help you if you ask this great question and you don't unmute yourself, and then you feel like you just spoke to nobody because no one heard you. So try your best to unmute yourself if you are planning on jumping in and interrupting. The last piece is we're going to be using a program that you may have used with some other people who have ran these sessions called Menti. And I'm going to ask you to go on your phone in a couple of minutes to menti.com, and that's going to be a way for us to interact and provide some feedback to one another. If you're using your phone to use your Zoom right now and display this video, that's not a problem. It's lots of people have had that question in the past. I think you just have to kind of just get out of or minimize Zoom or go to a new window, and it keeps your Zoom running so you can still hear, and you just open in the internet browser. So it shouldn't disrupt anything on that front. On any of those logistical boring pieces, is there any questions or concerns before we get started? No? Okay, great. So I'm going to share my screen now. And Kirsty, if you could just give me, turn your mic on and just let me know that this is working before I start talking.
Yep, we can see the slide.
Okay.
The goal is, now we see Mentimeter.
Okay. Okay, just bear with me here. Okay, so on your phone, if you could go to menti.com and use this code that you see at the top, 982366. And just as a way of kind of testing out this platform and making sure it's working and everyone's interacting with it, what type of environment are you in right now? Do you have kids around? Do you have no kids around? Do you have multiple kids around? And in the bottom right corner on my screen, you'll see the amount of people that have participated, so we can certainly make sure that everyone's getting their input in there. Okay, cool. So it looks like the Menti is working. You know, this is just to test the program, but also to say, you know, we're all in different situations. So, you know, whether it's kids or even an animal, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. So don't hesitate to step away if you have to. Try and keep yourself muted if there's a lot of chaos going on in the background, but certainly appreciate people attending in all the different circumstances that we have on the call. Um, so on your Menti screen, you should see this slide come up now. It should kind of toggle over automatically for you. You don't have to put the code in again or anything like that. So just in general, what percentage of behavior do you think the research suggests is dictated by the environment that somebody is in? You might hear a little bit of racket behind me just for a few minutes. My wife's just coming home with some groceries, so apologies if it's distracting. Yeah, so most people definitely have their finger on the pulse of this one. So, you know, quite generally speaking, and in some cases it should be phrased as kind of up to 70%, but the correct answer is 70%. So there's a really important takeaway, obviously, from this in terms of how we start to set up our environment and integrate the different pieces of training and performance that we want to utilize in order to help athletes change their behavior, start to build habits, start to become quite routine in the way that they think, what they pay attention to, what they value, what they see as high performance, what they think is normal. So there's a huge opportunity here, actually, in this 70%. You know, as coaches and support staff and leaders, one of the things that you have a lot of control over, in most cases, is the type of environment that you set up. What you don't have a lot of control over, you know, is the upbringing of all the athletes, is things like the individual values of people, things that you really had no opportunity to influence as these people were growing up and developing, even previous coaches they've had. But what you do have control over is the environment that they're in now, and you know, the second by second or day by day experience that they have with you and your team, and the people that you've surrounded them with. So this is a really big opportunity. Now, most people think that, you know, my job in the mental training or mental skill area is, you know, people associate that with one-on-one meetings. Like, it's just you sit with athletes, you talk, and that's actually the opposite approach that I've taken. You know, I've really invested and bought into this concept that the environment dictates 70% of behavior. And so a large part of my job, Lisa Tomaitis, our head coach of our women's basketball team, jokes that, you know, I'm an environmentalist, because the first approach that I'll take to any problem, whether it's you know, with a group of athletes, or whether it's with staff, the first place that I'm going to start is the environment. What can we change in our environment that is going to kind of entrench people in a situation where they start to change the way that they behave because this is how we've set it up, versus attacking every problem on a one-on-one basis and trying to have this individual behavior change model, which really is very time consuming and doesn't really make sense when you look at the slide that we're on right now. The other thing that I wanted to ask was, what do you think the success rate is of lectures? So lectures like presentations, and by that I mean, you know, in terms of retention and behavior change. What do you think the success rate is of a classic lecture style presentation? Yeah, great. So you guys are killing this. So the correct answer here is again where the majority fell, which is 20%. So in general, the research shows that the success rate in terms of retention and behavior change of lectures is 20%. So this, again, I think this is a really important fact to keep in mind when you start to think about the different pillars of performance. You know, kind of, we've classically been taught to think of them as pillars that are separate from each other, and you've got performance in the middle. And as a result, we set up the situation where, you know, people come in and present to the team, and you might have one or two or three or however many presentations you have, or lectures. And, you know, when you get really high quality service, it's a workshop. Workshops are great. They're the best version of a lecture that you can have. But in general, you know, if you start isolating the pillars and then presenting things in isolation, you run into some problems. You know, one, you're not changing your environment in a way that influences the second by second thoughts and behaviors and actions of the athletes in that environment. And number two, you're increasing the amount of time that you're putting people in a situation where they typically get about 20% out of that situation. Whereas, you know, if you look at the retention pyramid, and if you have any interest in this, Google the retention pyramid, and you'll get a lot of results on that. You know, the best thing that you can do is actually to live something, or to try it, or to teach others things. And that's where people really start to believe and buy in and retain information. So I just think, you know, these are kind of fundamental pillars to think about when we're thinking about using the daily training environment as a mechanism to train the brain, versus these one-on-one meetings or presentations, or some of the more classic methods of integrating something like mental training. And this applies to every pillar, in my opinion, not just mental training, but it's certainly how I've approached it. So I'm just going to zip over here to the slideshow. So if I had to kind of state this simply, I would say the goal is to create an environment that, one, truly integrates all the pillars. So integrates on a second by second, a day by day basis. And two, gradually normalizes, and by normalizing, therefore training, because it's becoming habitual, mental skills on a daily basis. So the way that you do this is by dripping developmental opportunities into sessions that are already prioritized in the daily schedule and prioritized in the athletes' minds. We know that athletes see schedules a certain way. You know, they just seem to think that some things are more normal than others. And so, you know, what we found to be really successful is to try and keep some of that structure in place, to try and keep that day-to-day operation running, and then be really creative and integrated in how we look at those sessions and those things that are already in the schedule. And I'm going to give you some examples of that we found to be really successful. Now, as I zip over here, if you just go back on your phone to menti.com, and take a look at these three pillars. Before you fill this out, so just before you take any action there, these are three pillars that we've identified as our top priorities in our mental training program with Canada Basketball. So in short, it's conscious, connected, and composed. And by consciousness, you know, I'm being quite general here, but, you know, we're referring to self-awareness and mindfulness. So being conscious of your own thinking and feeling. By connectivity, we mean communication and alignment, communication in both verbal and body language, how we solve problems together, and then alignment in terms of believing in the same things, believing in the vision that we've set, believing in the values that we have set, making sure that we feel like everyone is on board and kind of paddling in the same direction. And then composure, referring to emotional intelligence, which, you know, everything suggests that emotional intelligence is critical to be composed. And then just overall resilience. So being able to bounce back quickly and to ideally, keep your highest level of performance through pressure and through stress. So these are three things that we've identified as really critical for us and our team. It's a team sport, but that's not going to be the same for everybody. But just as a simple exercise, what I was thinking that you guys could do is, on the scales that you see in front of you, just kind of rate how relevant or important are each of these three things to your program and to your group of athletes that you coach and work with. Okay, we've got 6 people in, so we'll wait for another 5. Okay, so, obviously, you guys are scoring all of these pretty high, and that's good. I mean, I wanted to share this with you because it's been years kind of in the making, and, we feel quite confident that it's a model that can be successful. Now, it doesn't cover everything, and, there's a lot of things that you have to throw at the wall to come up with clarity around the mental pillars that you're going to embed and value in your program. But it looks like people generally are resonating with these. So I wanted to share this just to make 2 points. One, this is an exercise that I highly recommend you go through as a program, as the foundation and starting point of everything else I'm about to say. So it's really important to identify what are those 3 things, and at an absolute maximum, what are those 5 things that you're going to kind of identify as core fundamental pillars of your mental training or your mental skills development in your program. What are you really going to dig your heels in on and start to normalize and start to build into your environment on a daily basis, that at the end of the day, accepting the fact that you're not going to cover absolutely everything, you feel like you've created a space and a culture and an environment where the athletes, after a month or a few months of being involved in your program on a daily basis, and of course not now in the COVID era, but when things are relatively back to normal, that once they spend time in your environment, you don't have to tell them or present to them what's valued and what mental skills that the team or the group is working on, because it's so normal that they just know. They start to really understand and pick up on these things on a daily basis. Now, of course, it certainly helps to share and be clear around what those mental pillars are. But in the ideal scenario, they're so integrated and embedded in what you do on a day-to-day that the athletes are picking up on that regardless of whether it's been presented or not. And at the end, I will challenge you a little bit to share what you think your mental pillars might be in your own program. So I just wanted to share a few examples of what this looks like. I've obviously, it always sounds easier, and these presentations always have like rose-colored glasses on them a little bit, but I hope these examples make some sense to you guys in terms of ways that I took a look at the schedule and the things that were already happening in the Canada basketball environment when I was brought in 2016, and started there. Once we had our pillars in place and we knew what we wanted to achieve, how can we create an environment that uses that 70% rule, that makes sure that we're influencing their behavior towards those pillars on a daily basis. And if we're not doing something every day in all 3 of those pillars that's quite well thought out and deliberate, then we're failing. Then we're we have no excuse when at the end of the day, if they're not able to be connected as a team, if we didn't put them in an environment that allowed them to become connected, but we just presented on the importance of connectivity a few times, there's no chance that we can expect them to be connected. So let's start with conscious. So at the whiteboard there, you see Danielle. She's our head therapist with Canada Basketball. You see a hotel room at the Delta in Edmonton where we train. You see towels on the ground, both for laying on and for pillows. What this is a session that before I arrived, this session always existed. People would show up to camp, the athletes would show up, and they would do stretching and some physical mobility as a means of making sure that they start camp properly, and they had just come off plane rides from all over the world, and so it was an hour of maintenance basically. So I thought to myself, well, man, it would be so great if we could help them set some intentions and set some goals and start to focus on what's important to them while they're here. And we could have very well said, well, let's build a presentation and do it after dinner, after the stretching session or whatever. But in the end, if we follow the principles that I've shared at the start, the best solution was let's do it together. So what happens in this session is Danielle takes them through the same things that she did before. And every 10 minutes, I do 3 minutes of mindfulness. So they just lie flat on their back and just take them through 3 minutes of, might be 1 or 2 minutes of controlled breathing. And then at the end of that, I'll do 1 minute of intention setting. So, visualize some of the things that you want to achieve while you're here in terms of the relationships you want to build with people around you. What intentions do you have when it comes to your compete level and your work ethic, and can you see yourself executing in those ways? And so we would repeat that for an hour, so they end up doing a couple of mindfulness sessions, and it's all happening together. Another example of this that Danielle and I have worked on is she does the warm-up on the court as well before practice, so they take 20 minutes of warm-up, and we do some breathing and mindfulness off the court, as I just shared. And so Danielle and I thought, well, why can't we do 2 minutes of breathing and mindfulness every 10 minutes of warm up on the court? If we want them to be using self-regulation when they have their basketball gear on and their shoes are on their feet and their shoes are on the floor, we have to put them in a situation where it's normal to do self-regulation, when their shoes are on their feet and their shoes are on the floor. So as a result, you see Natalie Achanmo here, one of our captains, taking part in 2 minutes of breathing and mindfulness that we have included in our on-court warm-up. Another example of this from the conscious pillar is our Thriving Mind journals. So we've just created a journal that we've literally called it a Thriving Mind journal. On the left, you see some information on why it works. So I've just included like a teeny bit of research, a lit review in a user-friendly way on the topics that we dive into on the right. So letting go, gratitude, and setting intentions. And on the right, you see one of the pages from the journal, which we physically hand to the athletes when they arrive at camp. What we noticed was we have meetings after breakfast, and there's always time left over at the end of those meetings. And the athletes are already going to those meetings because we do video in them and other technical and tactical things. So I thought, well, let's use the last 10 minutes to give them optional journaling time. And we'll just provide them with these journals that are structured in a way that we know could be effective. And, when you do something that's optional, you expect maybe 40 to 60% of people to take part. And instantaneously, we had everybody doing it. So we had 100% of people taking the option to spend that extra 10 minutes of meeting time on identifying things they wanted to let go of from the day before, things they're grateful for today, and intentions around what they wanted to learn about given the type of day that we had in front of us. So again, we're not changing anything. I'm not presenting anything. We're not trying to promote anything. We're just creating an environment where if you want to journal, here it is. I don't need to present to you on letting go and gratitude and intentions. We can include that in the structure of the journal. Another thing that we're really focused on is being connected, as I mentioned at the start. So in every team meeting at the start, we do what we call energizers, but they're really just quick connection activities, or QCAs, as we call them at the start of the quad. And I'm gonna hit play on this video, and I hope it plays on your screen just to show you that how normal these became. And this video is from the day of our Belgium game, which was essentially a must-win game to go to Tokyo against a top 10 team in the world in Belgium. So that, at their home court. This happened a few months back in our final Olympic qualifier. So that's to set the scene. This is our athletes taking part in an energizer, which is basically just charades. So in a couple of hours from that video, we're entering into one of the most stressful performance situations that we've been in the past 4 years as a team. But because that's a video session that they're already going to, and it's become normal, we've done it in training. We have those sessions every single day where we just come up with 5-minute games for them to play. They get to shake out that nervous energy. They start to communicate with each other. It prevents them from shutting down or going internal. And of course, you can always debrief and share messages, quite quickly around communication. And normally at the start of these, I'll step up and just say, game day, fun, like, let's have fun. You always play your best when you're having fun. So that's how we want to start the day. We need to communicate well with one another. Let's set that standard right now in this meeting, even though it's charades. Be world class at charades, basically. And the competitiveness comes out, and they just start doing what you just saw. We'll also include connection activities and warm up. So this is a warm up that Danielle and I spoke about. This is the first day of camp this summer, and you see cameras everywhere in the background because we're prepping for our Tokyo event and whatnot. And we thought, well, if we really want to be connected, we have to let them play. Like playfulness leads to the ultimate form of connectivity, where all that tension and nervous energy just becomes impossible to be around, because we're doing something that's so unrelated to the task itself. So we thought, well, let's do something different than basketball, so we, some of the younger players don't feel uncomfortable, and we can, talk about communication. And anyway, I'll show you the video. So again, there's nothing new in the schedule there. It's just 10 minutes of warm up where they're already going to be moving their bodies. So how can we combine these pillars in a way that makes it feel actually integrated? The last example on connectivity, we have a team identity that's based on 3 words, and our team identity as a whole is dynamic, relentless, and together. And so it's taken a long time to come up with those and get everyone on board, and that's not, we don't have time to go through that. But what I wanted to share was, if we've got this identity and, we claim that it's core to our success, and these things have to be present in order for us to win basketball games against the best teams in the world, then we better put it on the document that they see, the athletes see, as the most important document in the world, in order to, prepare for that event. And the athletes put a huge value on the scout. So we thought, well, we have to put these words at the top of the scout. We have to connect the plan that we have for every game to these 3 words, so they feel like our team identity is completely integrated with the plan for every game. So again, just a simple connectivity strategy that doesn't require anything additional other than a simple modification of the things that are already happening. I'm going to go a little bit faster here because I just have a few examples left. When it came to the composure pillar, one example that we worked on was um, influencing our training environment in a way where when difficult situations happen, when the other team is getting momentum, where problems need to be solved, making sure that we're solving those problems at the right times and in the right ways. And so we started integrating, in some cases, mandatory huddles. So Lisa and the coaching staff, if the players tried to just push through an issue without solving it, at the start of this process, Lisa would stop practice and say, huddle, like figure this out. No one's rushing you. The referees are going to wait. They're going to hold the ball. The worst that's going to happen is they're going to give you a warning. We don't need to call a timeout. Take a second amongst yourselves and solve the problem. And so we started changing our training environment to include these huddles. And then, to reinforce that, we started taking screenshots of situations where we felt the huddles were really adding to our composure and really making it difficult on the opponent. So we have situations like this where, we feel like we weren't off to a great start. And so our team makes a decision to have a quick huddle and communicate. And you notice they're all touching one another, which is something that we made sure was part of the process and training. And the best part about this is all the players from Mexico are facing away from each other. So, none of them are really making eye contact. None of them are solving any problems. So we're completely controlling our environment right now with a simple 10-second huddle. And the referees don't care. Like they might give a warning once in a while, but really there's no issues with this. And so we started just reinforcing this behavior and celebrating this behavior by integrating these screenshots into video sessions. After a connectivity energizer at the start of a meeting, we would put an image like this up and say, we've set out to be a really connected team. We make an effort to be connected every day, and this is what it looks like when it's really working. It actually turns into composure. Like our connectivity pillar has kind of connected itself to how composed we can be, and it's very clear. I'm not going to talk about this one because I'm kind of running out of time. So the last thing I'm going to do before any questions or comments come through, I know that was like drinking from a fire hose. I just threw a million things out there. On your mentee program, and it doesn't matter if you have these or not. Oh, I see a question in the chat. Oh, no need to rush. Thanks, Kirsten. It doesn't matter if you have these or not right now, but just take a second to think about the way that I've just described, that we have these three pillars that we care a lot about. We've decided that they're the most important things we want to influence. And then we've tried to change our day-to-day living when we're together as a team to reflect these pillars, being conscious, connected, and composed, and making sure we do deliberate things every day in those pillars without ever having to get the group together for an additional session. When you think of it that way, what do you think your mental pillars either are or what they could be? So if you don't have them, if you're not sure what they are, that's okay. Now's the time to just brainstorm what do you think they could be. So even just start with one, even if you only add one to this discussion board. No one's going to know who said what, so don't worry about that. What would be a mental pillar that okay, so we've got some coming in. So relationships, great. Community, cool. Confidence, adaptable, accountable. And there's absolutely no, there's no perfect model here. There's no right answers. Every team can have its own language, its own pillars, culture, team bonding, self-awareness, and cool. purpose, growth, respect. Very cool. So, as I look at these and as you reflect on, how much progress you can make in developing your own mental pillars, what I would encourage you to do is to start to think about this from an environmental standpoint and look at your day to day. Like, bring up an old schedule from training camps in the past, or um, from a season, in the past. It doesn't matter, and start to think about, like, literally go bit by bit of the things that you do in the run of a day, and ask yourself, am I deliberately involving or including these items that you've just written here in a way that, after a few weeks, months go by, that, they're training these things on a daily basis because you've changed the environment to allow that to happen, and that, it's become normalized, and as a result, kind of collectively valued. If relationships is the thing, does your environment reflect this huge value on relationships? And do you feel like their brains are starting to adapt to this environment in a way that's helping them build stronger relationships, to be close to one another? Self-awareness, I see self-awareness there. If that's something that you think is really critical to your team or to your athlete's performance, what can you do every day? Even if you're a paddling coach and you're on the water with athletes every day, a simple adjustment when it comes to self-awareness is, when you drive up in the motorboat to an athlete, are you just giving them feedback every time and saying, here's what I see? Or are you asking them to reflect on something, driving away for 5 or 10 minutes, coming back, and then hearing their thoughts on that reflection? Right? So are there ways that you can go, there's something I can change about every single part of my day that's going to build these skills? So I'm going to stop my screen share. Okay, so I'm going to shut up now in the spirit of lectures being ineffective, and take any questions, comments, discussion. I don't really know how this works normally, Christy, so you feel free to interject, but I'm open to any discussion.
Yeah, no, this is great. And this wasn't a boring lecture. This was great. A lot of great takeaways. Yeah, this is awesome. And I didn't want you to feel like you were rushed. Like, if you want to go back and show any of those slides, please feel free. Like, some of these sessions have actually ran like to an hour long. Yeah, if no one wants you to go back.
I see a thumbs up. I'm just trying to think.
Like
There's
the leaf one, or leap. I don't know what it said. That one would be kind of cool.
Okay, so let's go to the leap slide. Okay, so in the spirit of being connected, we had everyone in the team involved in a values creation exercise. So worked in small groups. Those groups shuffled around. We did it over 3 days to try and come up with, what we really believed was a value system that would work for us. And after 2016, the team felt like they really fell short. Lost to France in the quarterfinals at the Olympics, a team that they had beaten twice in the past few months leading up. And so, it became really clear that to get from where they were into that top four, so to play for a medal, to get in those semifinals was truly a leap. And so we landed on this value system that created that word leap. So loyal, excellent, accountable, and passionate. And then again, over this group workshop, this one really did require a workshop. I mean, you can't do everything in a way that is just subtly built into the environment. This needed to be done quite urgently and be accomplished over the span of 3 days. So we ended up with these core kind of behaviors and sayings that matched each one. So, loyal, protect and respect our culture, be excellent, never be too big to do the small details, be accountable, follow through on what you've committed to, and then be passionate, bring energy and ignite those around you. And the way that this got integrated into the environment was, okay, so first I was like, this needs to be visible at all times. So we printed out like 6 huge posters of this, and we put them up in places that were just kind of in eyesight in the locker room. We put them up in the video room. just to make sure that they were there. And then every few days, in other meetings that were already scheduled, whether it be a video session, for example, or even like a team logistics meeting about handing out gear or something like that, we would take between 5 and 10 minutes, and they would work in groups and come up with at least 2 examples that they felt really fit each of these words that had occurred over the past 3 days. We also did this as a staff. So in our morning staff meetings, 10 minutes was devoted to what did you do to protect and respect our culture? What was a difficult moment where you could have gone against it? You could have gone against the culture. It might be something as simple as asking someone to put their phone away at a meal, which is something that we've implemented to build connectivity. Never be too big to do the small details. We had athletes sharing examples of really, really almost like funny small things, like picking up some garbage in the gym, or wheeling the balls out, or helping Elaine bring the shoes out. But again, this normalizes it. So after a week, after 2 weeks, when you start to see the balls come out or the jerseys go in, you start to associate that with being excellent, right? Like you start to associate that with this leap that we're trying to take from the quarterfinals into the semis. So that was just one that I was going to share there. And the other one was this one. And Fabe, you'll recognize this one for sure. This is from a project we did at the Pan Ams, where we want to have these connectivity and our mental pillars showing up in the games. And so we want huddles, we want people physically connecting, we want them communicating well. So we developed a tracking sheet to track these things, and to include this tracking sheet in the statistics that the athletes receive in the Google Drive after the game. So again, we didn't want it to be anything, we didn't want it to be this big dramatic adjustment. We just wanted to show that there's a way that we can actually monitor these things. We can identify what things we're looking for, what things we know will make a positive difference in helping us build momentum as a team. And to make sure that it was accountable, we just put initials underneath any red block. So you see Sammy Hill in the first one, full team huddle on defensive fouls with urgency. You see, the red block was Sammy Hill. So that means we had 4 people in a huddle, and this player Sammy was so emotionally involved in something that happened that she just didn't execute that piece. And this was public, for the players to see. So again, we're just trying to, just like on a normal stat sheet, it shows who scored, it shows who played X amount of minutes, it shows who had the fouls. So why don't we show who huddled and who didn't? They're very used to that. It's normal day-to-day functioning for them to have things tracked and statted. So let's just include it in that. So again, I know this is a lot of information. My main goal here with these slides was not by any means to say you should be doing your own version of all of these things. It was more to say we found ways to make this work. Like we found ways to take that 70% rule and to just make it fit and smoothly, in some cases not so smoothly, but in a lot of cases smoothly modify our environment in a way that normalizes the things that we value from a mental skill building standpoint. I almost never present in our environment. And I'm not just saying that, like Fabe can attest to that. I almost never present anything. It's truly full days of managing the environment, making sure things are ticking the way we want. We call it our psychological climate. And that's almost my whole job is managing our psychological climate, because we know it's going to have the biggest influence on behavior. Okay, I'm truly done now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bryce. Yeah, that's really interesting, because you always hear of a mental performance consultant just having, like you said, like one-on-ones and talking about like using imagery and things like that. So this is really interesting and definitely brings a new perspective to my coaching. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Yeah, go ahead. I saw someone's, sorry, I can't see the
Annual.
names at the moment. Okay.
Yeah, annual. Like if like I've got like I coach some young guys, like 15-year-olds, and for a lot of these concepts, they've never been exposed to them. Things like visualization, and would it be appropriate to have a short presentation to introduce the principles, and then I love this is your presentation is great, by the way. Great job, excellent,
Oh,
really
thank you.
great stuff here. Yeah, excellent, really good. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, I think,
I understand what you mean about
yeah, for
lecture.
sure. That's a great question. You know, there's a lot of great content out there, and if I go to the extreme of lecturing, you know, if you have the best lecturer or presenter or researcher in the world, like world class, come in and present about mindfulness for an hour, I would leave that session going, feeling overwhelmed, like almost like, oh my God, there's so much information on mindfulness that we need to share with the athletes. And it almost ropes you into thinking like it can't be successful if they don't have this information. And slowly over time, I've learned that's completely untrue. It's always more impactful to have them do it than to teach them about it, um, if you can do it repetitively. So if you have multiple opportunities, like if you're looking at a situation where you're going, well, we only have like 3 days of training camp and we have like 2 touch points where, you know, we can do something in the mental pillar. Yeah, you might want to present. Like you might want to have someone come in and build their appreciation for a concept and they leave, you know, feeling more knowledgeable. But even in that situation, I would say like if you're not doing 5 or 10 minutes of mindfulness at the end of a mindfulness lecture, you failed, right? Like because they
Yeah.
have to do it. That's what athletes want to do. They want to perform the thing that you're teaching them. So, but in the situation where you can do it repetitively, use repetition to your advantage as much as you can and only present when things start to unravel. So I will, if it were me, I would start with a 10-minute mindfulness session and do it like 7 or 8 times first, really basic. Like you're almost presenting as it's happening. Like you're saying, you know, in the mindfulness, you're saying, spend 5 minutes just focused on your breathing. Like what part of your chest or your nose are you thinking about? Do you notice your attention drifting as you're doing that? So they're actually trying it instead of looking at the slide. And then if you feel like there's a disconnect, a 30-minute presentation after a few sessions is way more powerful because they can present to you, because you can ask them in the first slide, what are some of the most confusing or challenging parts of mindfulness that have caused you to struggle? And as soon as they start sharing with each other, well, I didn't understand this, or I find, you know, I'm too distracted, or my heart is racing. Now you're into the content that you would have presented anyway, that they've discovered themselves. So in my opinion, if you can start with the action, start with the actual behavior, start there every single time. Only present when you really feel like they just will not be successful if we don't give them this foundational knowledge in order to do this. But more times than not, you'll find that they actually don't need it. And what
Lost you.
Oh no. Just a sec, I'll message him.
I'm here.
Oh, you're
I'm
here.
back.
Okay.
I'm back. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I don't know what happened. Anyway, the last thought I was going to say is what's more important than them having the knowledge in something is them valuing it. And this is a really difficult one to balance. If you present on something in the wrong way or it's boring, their value reduces, right? But they might have a lot of knowledge. So they've gone, well, I learned about it, but I don't really value it because that was not an experience that I enjoyed. You can reverse that by having them do mindfulness, which is the example we're using right now, where they might go, I don't understand it very much, but I'm starting to really value it because I'm involved in it. So in general, you're not going to have success if they don't value something, and they lose their value on something really quickly if they don't feel like it's something they can actually do.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. One more quick question. What about something like goal setting?
again, goal setting. Man, I've seen some of the most boring presentations on goal setting ever.
Yeah.
I would approach goal setting like the journal example that I shared. So you're not saying, here are the types of goals, like learn about them. They're like, well, cool. Why am I sitting here for a half hour learning about them? Why can't I just set them? So what you could do is, if there's 5 minutes left in a meeting, if you have a goal setting sheet that's very clear and says a specific goal is blank, what's your SMART goals for the day or something. In my opinion, it's a heck of a lot better than presenting on it. But again, you may need to present to reach that threshold of foundational knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. That was excellent. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for the questions.
Hi, Bryce. I have a question.
Sure. Hi, Lisa.
Thanks again. This is great. So you as a team sat down and went through, and they came up with the principles of excellence, which is kind of like this overarching thing. But the mental pillars, was that you and the coaching staff that came up with that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then that kind of formed your strategy, and that was more communicated to the athletes, not created by the athletes.
Yes, you've nailed it. The mental pillars, I took a first pass at it, presented that to the coaches. Of course, you guys are coaches, this is something you do well. The coaches immediately were like, that's too dry, or that's not user-friendly, or that's not going to resonate with athletes. And so we landed on those three pillars as a kind of a group of staff. The LEAP values was a cultural development process. So we actually defined it as something much different than our mental training program. The mental training program was built on those 3 C's. Our culture was founded in the LEAP. So, they're like cousins, but they are different.
Right. Okay.
The culture,
more program based.
Sorry?
One is like the 3 C's are more program based, like that's part of like the actual like day-to-day programming by the coaches, by you, and the values is more team culture or ownership, and like what they're just generally trying to exude every day.
The 3 C's, the conscious, connected, and composed, are skills to be developed and learned on a daily basis. The LEAP items are values that hover almost above all of the skills. Like, as a general rule, you really need to value something to build it into a skill. Like, if I don't value, I don't know what an example, like if I don't value relationships, let's say, it's going to be really hard for me to build the skill of empathy. Empathy is not a value. Empathy is a skill. Like, empathy takes practice. There's a lot of content behind empathy that you can get better at it even after 2 days of learning about it. So for me to execute and build this skill of empathy, I need to value relationships. If I don't value relationships, why do I care, right? So the values kind of hover above everything else. And it's like, if a player comes in and they're kind of half-assing one of our connection activities, like charades before a video session, that's a skill that we're trying to build that they're not building because they don't value one of our 4 values, right? So they're going, what excellence, right? This is a small thing. It's 5 minutes of your day. If they don't value excellence, they don't care about that skill, right? Because that value of excellence should override anything else, any other qualms that they have with, I don't like charades, or I don't like whatever their problem is.
Right. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Was there another question there? I saw a hand waving.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I joined quite late. So I have a
Okay.
question. So I don't know whether you have this topic has been already discussed. So I want to know what do you think about coaching during matches? What advice you will give to the coaches when their players will be playing some matches? So what should be the strategy for a coach during the match?
Like from a mental standpoint specifically?
Yes, mental standpoint, correct.
What a question. Oh man. That's a big one. Okay, so if I had to sum it up, I would say pressure always reveals someone's truth in a way. So one of the issues that we had early on was our head coach knew how important some of these exercises were that we were building in terms of like our team identity, let's say. You know, she knew how important it was for us to be anchored in these things that we all believed in from a style of play standpoint, which is relentless, dynamic, and together, right? So that's like our style of play captured.
Okay.
But then she would go into timeouts and would only talk about one of them. So every single timeout, and we actually tracked this over the span of 2 years. Every single timeout, she was talking about the dynamic pillar. So she was talking about strategy. She was talking about tactics. We need to move the ball. We need to do this. We need to do that. The other two identity pillars were proving themselves not of a high value in her mind. And this leads me to my main point to your question. The ripple effect of you as a coach through to your players is incredibly strong, not just from a demeanor standpoint, like body language, energy, but also from an attentional standpoint. Like, what do you pay attention to as a coach in the most important moments? Because what you pay attention to is what they will pay attention to. So if you only pay attention to strategy, which was happening in our case, how do you expect them to be relentless? You've spent 2 years paying attention to strategy when everything is on the line, like when we're trying to win a game in the fourth quarter. So their default setting is becoming about strategy. And that leads to another problem, which is now I'm just trying to please my coach a lot, you know, through doing the right thing, by passing to the right person, by running the right play. But our other two identity pillars are there as insurance policies for bad strategy. And like, you can be relentless and together no matter if you're running like the best or the worst set in the world. But we, as a team, we weren't being relentless and we weren't being as together as we could be because our coach wasn't paying attention to it when it mattered most. So my suggestion to your question is pay attention to the things that you need your athletes to pay attention to in those big moments.
Yeah, and I think one thing is very important in this case. I have written something here. It's like it's always a coach has to be positive and most importantly, find opponent's weakness also during the matches. The coach has to be analyze in a better way the opponent weakness, and that he or she has to convey to the players during the matches.
Yeah, in concept, I agree fully. I don't think you need to be positive all the time. I've seen lots of cases where, you know, an intense energy from a coach, you know, sometimes perceived as, you know, what you would say is, I guess, traditionally negative, has a positive effect. So you want to have a positive effect as much as possible, but that can require a negative energy sometimes.
Yeah.
But in theory, what you're saying is accurate. The balance between, you know, think of yourself as like a human ripple effect to the players performing.
We have to actually, as coaches, we have to learn how to hide our frustration also when our players are playing. That is the most important aspect, I believe. We have to hide our own frustration also as a coach.
Yep. I think there's hide here, hide frustration.
Yes.
And then above that, like if that's like level 9 out of 10, level 10 out of 10 is to use it. Like to actually, you know, the emotional intelligence skill will be to recognize and label, I'm frustrated, what's causing that? How do I translate that into results? You know, because, you know, the research is pretty clear. If you're just hiding something is consuming, right? So if you're hiding an emotion, it's actually taking thought and energy to do that. So anyway, yeah, these are all good questions, good discussion.
Thank
It's a
you.
big one. You opened Pandora's box, so I'm going to close it in service of time.
All right, great. Thanks, Bryce. Any last questions or comments? Okay, so we'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, sorry. Our next session is actually this afternoon at 2 p.m. So Angela will be coming back on to talk about relative energy deficiency in sports. So she started the conversation last Thursday talking more about general information and what REDS kind of looks like. And today she'll be talking about strategies and how to manage that if one of your athletes is experiencing REDS. So that will be happening at 2 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. And then we have 2 more sessions this week as well. So keep an eye out on our social media and on our website and in the locker for updates. And thank you again, Bryce, for an awesome presentation. And thank you everyone for joining us. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or comments or concerns or any suggestions on future topics. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye.